There you
We're
go.
going to call the South Bay COG Board of Directors meeting to order for Thursday, July 27th at 6 p.m. We want to verify that we have a quorum.
Yes, we do.
Confirmation for the posting.
Yes, agenda was posted.
Announcement for any changes on the agenda.
I don't have any changes for the.
No changes.
Yeah, what-
None. Comments from the public.
Yep, two.
Two.
Yes, and they're filling out the forms.
For the sake of time, who wants to go first? While you're filling it out, just start speaking now and we fill out after the fact.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Mitchell. I'm a resident, 30-year resident of South Bay, and this is about the Sea Line extension. So the back wall of my property is abutted to Torrance city limit at the El Nido Park area. I often walk my dogs through Torrance neighborhoods, both here and in Tradero Park. And I feel that Torrance residents are my neighbors. The road is at my back fence, part of Torrance. I believe that Torrance's application for the Metro Row was a result of having no real skin in the game, just wasteland to them. I then learned from Metro's Georgia Sheridan that initially the final Torrance destination was downtown, which would have brought the train through the crowded residential row areas in Torrance by building the Torrance Transit Center at Crenshaw. That thought was terminated, and those affected residents along the row were spared. Please understand that Lawndale and Redondo Beach residents are faced with the same intrusion that Torrance actively interceded in to avoid. By advocating for the road, Torrance has put South Bay neighbors in the same crosshairs that they sought to avoid. Although the Hawthorne route avoids these neighborhoods, Torrance has indicated opposition to this route because presumably the route trespasses over important businesses, Jerome's and the Volvo dealership. This could be remedied by Metro with a little engineering, but building a commuter rail system designed to handle nearly 300 trains per day, every day, is a major infrastructure project and not be dismissed by anyone. So perhaps a no-build solution is the best for the South Bay. Metro has offered a high-frequency bus option that could take advantage of the two new transit centers and deliver riders to targeted destinations. Other more tailored solutions could include an executive bus service to LAX and SoFi that would allow park and ride services and be an income generator for the transit centers. Non-polluting LPG buses can serve these functions as fueling stations already exist. Please, let's work together as good neighbors and avoid disastrous outcomes that will forever divide our communities. Make Metro a service to the community. Back here with the ground.
Thank you.
Baby just woke up.
Next.
Hi, I'm Nikki Negretti Mitchell, and I'm a fourth generation South Bay native. I attended my first Torrance City Council meeting to address very much appreciated, favorable, but inaccurate remarks about our situation on the right of way that were made at their July 20th Transportation Committee. With our city council, I pointed out that while we deeply appreciate the empathetic statement about buying a house on the tracks with 2 passing trains per day being different than adding several dozen, doesn't even come close. I shared that we've been told in an email from Mark Deerking, it'll actually be between 200 to 300 passing trains per day at a frequency of between 5 minutes at peak hour to 10 or 12 minutes off peak between the hours of 4 a.m. to midnight. I provided a screenshot of that email to Torrance CMs. Metro also confirmed to us trains will run 365 days per year. It helps to talk with Metro. They're always responsive. Also stated by their reps is when the last train leaves the station from the north at midnight, it will hit Torrance possibly around 1 a.m. There is an adjacent Maricopa Street residential neighborhood and 208th Street industrial business community to deal with this sheer volume, frequency, duration of hours. I asked Torrance the question, would those communities be concerned about the potential for 1 a.m. activities? I have to commend Torrance City Council members for their desire for transparency and for conveying they are listening to constituents' voice concerns and taking action accordingly. I mention this because in my own Redondo Beach District 3 for 8 years, we got nothing but non-answers at best, at worst, got ignored. I credit Christian Horvath for the suggestion of studying Hawthorne Boulevard in an elevator profile. That was smart. But his suggestion to study trenching the row was frighteningly tone deaf and 100% dismissive of a large swath of his constituency. It led Metro down the wrong path of wasting valuable time and resources to study that non-starter. It was Director DuPont Walker who insisted Metro follow through with the elevated Hawthorne Boulevard studies, which they did finally start 2 weeks before their public walks according to their walk guide. Councilmember Matucci used an analogy of a 30-year married couple to make a point which was well taken. My analogy for our right-of-way story is comparing it to that relationship when you're in love with the potential of what it could and should be while ignoring all of the red flags. For years, we've been trying to communicate to tone deaf ears and received nothing but disrespect all of this time. We're very grateful that some of you are finally listening, so a big massive thank you to that.
Thank you. Now we have our consent calendar. Entertain a motion to.
Second.
Properly moved in second.
Any opposition? Any abstentions?
Thank you, David. Now we have presentations. Clear water project from the Los Angeles County Sanitation District. Robert Ferretti is the Chief Engineering and General Manager for the Sanitation District of Los Angeles. He has been the Chief Engineer for 4 years and has worked for the district for 30 years. He reports directly to the Board of Directors comprised of the mayor of the 78 cities and the Board of Supervisors for unincorporated county territory. The district provides water waste management for 5.6 million residents and manages roughly 20% of the solid waste in the county. In addition, he has Glenn Acosta, is a senior engineering in the Public Works Office. He is responsible for community outreach on clear water projects. During his tenure at the district, he has represented the agency on regulatory and legislative affairs and served as an operational engineer on the Joint Water Pollution Control Plant in Carson. And I just want to make a side note on it. If you have not gone to the Sand District to do the actual tour of it, I really implore upon you to go out there and do an actual visit. And I did speak with him already that we're, Jackie, to set up something where we can get the actual bus that's available. They have do a bus tour of the Sand District. It's all yours.
Thank you, Cedric. And that bus tour would not only of our facility, but the demonstration facility we have with the Metropolitan Water District for the big recycled water project there too. So you can learn about that as well. Well, thank you for having me here today to give an update on this project. This project really has been 20 years in the making, and we're roughly close to halfway complete with the tunnel. So it's a good time to give you an update on how everything's going. Next slide, please. You can see our service area. We serve, as Cedric said, it's really 5.5, 5.6 million people. We handle the wastewater for most of the county with the exception of Los Angeles and a few other cities. And that's why there's a total of 78 of the 88 cities are within our jurisdiction. It's very good to see current and former directors here. And another note for us, we were formed in 1923, so this is our centennial year, 100 years of service that we're celebrating. And we'll be having an event later this year to celebrate that as well. All of the cities here, unincorporated LA County, connect into our system. So your wastewater from all your homes and businesses goes through your city systems, county systems, and into the sanitation district system. And if I can have the next slide. Most of that wastewater is treated at our Joint Water Pollution Control Plant in Carson. That plant started in 1928 as a very small plant and has grown with LA County. It's now one of the nation's largest plants. And this is the plant that the chair was talking about that you could visit and tour. We actually have a public tour available August 5th on Saturday, open to the public for this. But we can also, we'll provide a dedicated tour for the COG to come out and we can get in detail on some of the projects. It is the main hub for our sewer system. We've got other exciting projects here as well that I'll mention at the end of my presentation. Next slide, please. So the wastewater flows into this plant and in about half a day, 10 to 12 hours, it's treated and then it's currently discharged out 2 tunnels that were built over 60 and 80 years ago. And you can see the alignment of those tunnels that were built. These tunnels were built obviously a long time ago before there were really seismic codes. Since the 58, both tunnels have been in service as well. So you have a seismic risk and due to global warming, and we've seen a lot of these storms that drop a lot of water. When a lot of rain falls, a lot of it gets into our sewer. These tunnels are near their capacity with respect during those storms. Hence the need for a new tunnel to be built up the seismic code and built with greater capacity. Next slide, please. So here's the alignment of the new tunnel, and you can see it in green. And whereas the blue tunnel, of course, back then in the late 30s and late 50s followed a pretty straight path, a lot got built up since then, right? So we followed public right-of-ways for the most part, staying in streets, going through Harbor Regional Park as well. And the new tunnel is a total of 7 miles. It'll be 18 feet in diameter. The existing tunnels are 12 and 10, 12 and 8, so they're much smaller in capacity. So the new tunnel will be able to take all the flow from the facility. A couple of other things about it. Expensive project, over $700 million. We did a project labor agreement, and that worked out very well. 700 million, about 550 million of that is financed through state and federal low interest loans, and that over bonds has saved us over $150 million over the life of the repayment. So it's significant that we were able to get that money. Another element of this, which was very, very key. I mean, obviously, when you're building a tunnel under people's homes, it can be kind of scary, just the thought of it. So we've been doing public outreach on this, in essence, for about 17 years, well before the planning was complete, going out to the communities. In fact, we've had over 500 group meetings. We've had a number of one-on-one meetings. I want to recognize Glenn Acosta because really for the most recent time, he's been the one out there meeting one-on-one with homeowners, going to the neighborhood associations and to the schools, and really doing the outreach and making everybody understand what the project is, what the impacts will be. So that has been really successful. We've received some awards actually for the outreach that we've done. Next slide. I think you saw on the previous picture, you saw our workers back in the 30s and 50s kind of in a mining operation. Well, in today's world, they use what's called a tunnel boring machine or a TBM. That front head that you saw rotating is where it cuts through the soil, pulls that soil in through the machine, and it gets processed and pulled out of the shaft. It's quite an operation. You can see all of this is the trailing gear for the front device. It takes a lot of energy, power to run it. It takes a crew of people to maintain it. You've got to supply air, water. You got to convey the dirt out as you cut it. They actually liquefy the dirt to be able to pump it out. And as you continue to build this, you have to build these utilities longer and longer over the lines. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But ours is about 800 feet long. It's 2.5 football fields. You'll get a picture of it later. And just a side note, we've really incorporated, Glenn and others have incorporated the schools in this, teaching them about this. And not only did they have an art contest, but art on the TBM, they had a naming contest. And one of the students came up with the name for the TBM as Rachel, after many of you may know Rachel Carson, the author of Silent Spring in the early 60s, which started the environmental movement. So it was refreshing to see that a young student could recognize that book from the 60s and its impact. So it is called Rachel is our TBM's name. Next slide, please. So there's kind of a graphical picture with some of it cut away. You can see the cutting blade cuts through, it moves very slowly. It's going to take a number of years to go that 7 miles. But what was interesting there is you saw it builds in 5-foot segments. So it cuts for 5 feet and then it builds the pipe behind it in it's 6 segments that are actually manufactured up in Palmdale. We kept that local, delivered to the site, and then it pushes off of those. So as it goes, it builds 5 feet at a time. And then depending upon the soil, some days it makes, 100 feet of progress. Some days it only makes, 20 feet of progress, depending upon whether it's looser soil or bedrock. Next slide, please. This shows you, this is an aerial of the plant, and it shows you our main shaft site. This is where we actually drop the tunnel boring machine in. This is where we'll make the connections with the effluent lines from our plant, and then it'll go to the tunnel. We'll show the tunnel route in a second, but the shaft site itself is 100 feet down the opening to the tunnel, and I think you'll see that in the next slide. Yeah, as I mentioned, it's 800 feet long. The shaft is about 50 feet wide. It's pretty big. So to actually put the tunnel boring machine down, you have to assemble it in pieces, and they build it. And then they cut a little bit of the soil, and then they put more and more of it down as they build. You can see air and water and power lines and other utilities that go down the shaft as well. We were able to take some people down the shaft, and if anybody's interested, we can set up a tour. You can go down and you can definitely walk through some of the early part of the tunnel. I mean, with an 18-foot diameter, you can see a lot of it. Next slide, please. This is what the shaft looks like today. This is the entrance to the tunnel. So the interesting thing about it is there's going to be a shaft at the start, and that tunnel boring machine will come out at the very end, 7 miles. So every time that there's a shift crew change, the guys have to go, there's a vehicle that runs down and back. Now it's taking about 20-25 minutes to go. They're about 3 miles in, but that's the roadway. You can see they've developed a little path for the vehicle to go down back and forth each time. And you can see the big airlines and the other utilities that are part of it once again.
What's the total crew size?
Total crew size is about, so it only takes a few people to actually operate the tunnel boring machine, but there's 10 to 15 people that are trailing, that are doing the maintenance on the equipment, extending the lines, and it varies, right?
It's about 100 people
Total.
in 3 shifts.
Next slide, please. So here, this shows you the tunnel alignment and some of the progress that it's made. We started tunneling, obviously, in November 2021. We're about at the 3 mile mark, so we still have a little less than 4 miles to go. We're right at, for those of you that are familiar, under Gaffey, near that target on Gaffey. So just a place where our tunnel boring machine is. It's at various depths as it goes through. It's always about at least 40 to 50 feet down, but actually pretty soon it's going to go even deeper relative to the surface as well. So the question is, well, what are the impacts to the community? And one of the impacts could be that you could get vibration up above, which would be obviously very unsettling to neighbors. So along the way, we have little geotechnical monitoring stations that monitor for any vibration or movement of the ground. And then there are strict tolerances that we have per, most of this is through the city of Los Angeles with the city of LA permit. And we haven't had any issue with that. We had a little issue with noise near the 110 freeway, but we were able to manage that. Other than that, it's been relatively smooth sailing with the tunnel boring machine. It's just a slow progression as it moves along. Can I get the next slide? I think this is an aerial of the path underground that you can see the tunnel boring machine took. This is leaving our site. It's adjacent, right adjacent to the 110. It's going to turn and go through the golf course, Harbor College, and then of course under the park, well under the water. And there, I think that's along Gaffey there already, and that's by the Little League fields, and it's a little bit more. That's the Home Depot. Yeah, that's the target exactly that we're going to make a little turn there at that point as we go closer to White Point, Royal Palms Beach. Can I get the next slide? So just this is a look inside real quickly. You can see the first several feet of tunnel. I mean, that was kind of the most critical as they built and testing out the system to build the 5-foot sections and get everything done. You can see in October 2021. And you can see they took a photo there when they reached the first mile. And you can just see all the infrastructure and hardware that are part of this. But this is a tunnel that, you know, as I mentioned, we'll be able to take all our flow. We'll be able to actually gravity flow out of our plant. And what that means, we won't have to spend energy to pump out into the ocean. So that makes it even more efficient. And in the future, with our Pure Water project, this tunnel may even be able to serve as kind of a retention basin to be able to use some of this water then to also recycle it. It'll be able to sit there. It's actually sloped back to the plant on purpose. Can I get the next slide? So here you can see the workers coming out. That's the machine that goes back and forth. The new crew coming in. Before I open it to question, the two other things that I'd love to talk to you about and what's happening. There's a lot happening in Carson. Cedric knows that. There's always a lot happening in Carson.
Always.
And we've got the Pure Water Southern California project. We just had the State Water Board chair come out and a couple of assembly members, Gibson and Lisa Calderon last week. We received $80 million from the state last year, not this year, from their budget to kickstart that project. So we've got a demonstration plant there that shows the advanced treatment. They're really developing Metropolitan the conveyance. The idea is that this facility would recycle, take the water to a higher level of treatment, and then put it in the local groundwater basins, Central Basin and the San Gabriel Basin. So when there's a lot of imported water, we're topping off the groundwater basins. When there isn't imported water, we can withdraw that water from the groundwater basins. If we have excess, they can even move it forward and mix it in with Colorado River water and state project water to blend it to create another routine supply. So you can learn about that. The other thing that is really exciting there that's kind of understated is that we're now recycling about 400 to 500 tons a day of food waste and organic waste to help cities comply with SB 1383. So we take it directly. You saw those big circular tanks. We take it in, those are digesters. They break down the organic material, create digester gas, renewable gas that we produce electricity from and vehicle fuel from. And we're also working with the gas company to directly inject that into their pipeline too. They have requirements for renewable natural gas. This is all part of the circular economy, comes from us. It returns as energy, and actually some of the solids too, we utilize as fertilizer in farms too after composting. So there's a lot going on there, and by all means, we can set up a tour of the site and the demo plant.
Thank you so much for that. Any questions you got?
Have you encountered any surprises in your boring? And you're low enough, you're probably not encountering contamination, I guess, but either that or and groundwater as you get closer to the ocean?
So, we had actually groundwater at the initial site where the shaft, the bottom of the shaft was actually in groundwater. Glenn was relaying to me that a lot of the work at the bottom was done by divers with essentially zero visibility to make sure the rebar was placed appropriately. And a big part of that shaft, the initial work was making sure it was sealed from groundwater so you wouldn't have groundwater coming back. They haven't had issues yet. As I mentioned, they designed it. It's kind of weird. You're discharging it out into the ocean, but it slopes back very gently to the plant. You still have enough differential there to be able to discharge, but that allows, if you encounter anything, you can easily pump it out and remove the groundwater. They haven't. The other thing we had done before is extensive borings before we even started as part of the planning to make sure the path to characterize the soil and the different locations to make sure there weren't surprises.
No underground cities or anything?
No underground cities. Like I said, we're 40 to 50 minimum, mostly deeper. And then as we get towards the beach, we're kind of even, it goes to like 400 feet. 460 feet is the deep, yeah. So we'll be much deeper. And then at that location, it'll be bedrock.
Great presentation. As a civil engineer, you make engineering exciting. It's great.
Civil engineering is always exciting.
It always is. So, so I've been to the outfall as well with one of your boats. And
On the marine boat,
biologists out, and I wondered, as the water quality improves of the outfall, have you seen changes in marine life?
Yeah, so back in 2002, we completed an upgrade of our joint plant where we upped the treatment level there. And in that time since then, we have seen, for example, those kelp forests, they're kind of seasonal, they grow and they diminish, but they've been much bigger than they were before because there's less sediment and other materials going to the ocean. So we have seen that. The other thing, unfortunately, many of you probably familiar, we had DDT we continue to have DDT off the coast. It was discharged from a facility and through our plant and out to the outfall. And that has been monitored, and those concentrations over time have been going down as it breaks down.
Great.
Very interesting to be on the boat and see all
Yes.
the marine life, but do you still do that for
We
council
still
members?
do that. We have some spots available. I announced them yesterday. We actually have spots available for Saturday, this Saturday. If you're interested, you can call my secretary, Rochelle, and we also have spots available August 26th. Yeah, and it, what he is referring to, we have a monitoring boat that goes off the coast. It leaves from San Pedro. It's about a 3.5 hour cruise.
Not a good number.
What's that?
That's not a good number.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah. And we go out over where we discharge into the ocean, and they'll actually pull a sample of the marine life near our outfall. And this time, we have an ROV, remote operated vehicle, that goes down and it's taken a high definition video, and you can actually see where the clean water is coming into the ocean as well. So it's a good tour. Plus, they just talk about the marine kind of environment and condition in general. So you'll learn a lot. We have our biologists on board as well.
Something similar.
Thank you, Robert, for making that interesting.
Thank you. And I'd love to be back here if you guys are interested in those other things. We can do detailed presentation.
Can they just maybe not name the projects, things that sound almost alike so we can't keep track of them?
Clearwater.
And Blue Water, that was
Yeah.
another one, is
I'm surprised how much time it takes to come up with the name. But we try and come up with a name that people would, the public would kind of understand what the project is and appreciate it.
Thanks again. Thanks, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you.
big flush.
Now we have our Civic Sparks Fellows Program. Kim?
Gonna go ahead, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying this is really exciting. The Civic Spark Fellows that we get every year do a tremendous amount of work for each of your cities. And unfortunately, we lose them every August. And so the two people that you're gonna see are people that will be leaving us in August.
No, actually, Talia.
Oh, Talia will be staying. Yeah, we've actually hired one of them. They're so good that we have made offers to several of them. And one of them will be staying, but, and we will have new Civic Spark people coming, but I think I was really excited to see this presentation and I hope you'll enjoy it. And I'm gonna let Kim introduce.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Lauren, who's gonna come up first. Sorry, great. And Lauren had worked with our climate action planning, and what I think is really important about this partnership that we have with working with the fellows is that they're able to do things that the cities really need but don't have resources. So all of your cities have greenhouse gas emission inventories. You all have adopted climate action plans. Some of the cities were actually looking at ways that they could see if they were that bought cleaner electricity, for example, what their membership would look like in the Clean Power Alliance. And our fellows really have done and supported your staff in doing a lot of that work. And if a city was to actually hire somebody to come in and do like greenhouse gas calculations, that would be around $50,000 to $100,000 per city. So if you think about that coming to your city, and then we have these fantastic people coming in and doing that for. And what's interesting also about climate action planning, especially greenhouse gases, is that you have a lot of different methodologies sort of that you can choose from. We have to make sure that we get the right one that matches what this area is, what your city is like. And so for Lauren here, I think I had her go back and you do like 3 different methodologies because there was like 3 different ones that have been used by other cities that were locally. And so we figured out what was the best actually for this city, for our cities. So with that, Lauren, I'm gonna go ahead and let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much. So hello, everybody. I will be presenting on my work with the South Bay Cities Council of Government. I am a 3/4 time fellow, so I just started in January and I will be ending at the end of August. You can please go to the next slide. Just a little about myself. I'm Lauren Estrella. I graduated from Cal State Northridge with my master's degree in environmental and occupational health. I also hold a BS in biochemistry from UCR. I am a mother of a 5-year-old daughter named Priscilla, and I have ties to the South Bay through my father. He lives in Wilmington and is a longshoreman. Priscilla and I love to go to his house every weekend, and we just love going around in the South Bay. So the health and wellness of all of our member cities is very important to me. Next slide, please. So you may be wondering, what is the purpose of a greenhouse gas emissions inventory? So for this particular inventory, we will evaluate each city's emissions in the years 2019 and 2020 and compare them to the emissions reduction targets that each of the member cities had adopted back in 2017 with their climate action plan. So this goal also aligns with landmark legislation back in 2006, requiring California to reduce its overall greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020 and 40% below 1990 levels in 2030. This goal also aligns with 2022 legislation for California to reduce its dependency on fossil fuels and achieve a net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, but no later than 2045. Next slide, please. So our climate projects timeline. It's very complex here, but let me go through with it. We started all of the climate projects in 2011. We first completed a 2005 and 2007 greenhouse gas inventory using 2005 as a Next, in 2013, we completed a 2010 and 2012 greenhouse gas inventory. In 2015, we completed and the cities adopted an energy efficiency measure. In 2016 and 17, land use, transportation, greening, solid waste, and energy generation and storage measures were approved by city staff. In 2017 and 18, we completed the climate action plans, which cities had fully adopted, and a board approved sub-regional cap. I want to pause here and just say that each of the climate action plans, a climate action plan was created for each of the member cities, and they were fully adopted. The board also approved the sub-regional cap, which is used to help guide future projects. Next, in 2019, we completed and approved a sub-regional adaptation plan. In 2021, we began the 2019 and 2020 greenhouse gas emissions inventory updates. And now here in 2023, we are continuing with this emissions inventory updates. And we're beginning to look at next steps for our climate action plan updates. Next slide, please. So here's a general overview of what will be discussed. First, I would like to go over components of my project that are in the implementation stage. I have been working on the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. They are reported in carbon dioxide equivalents since there are many greenhouse gases to consider. This includes community energy and transportation related requests and analysis of emissions. This project also includes municipal energy and fleet data gathering and emissions analysis. I will then talk about how all of this is being brought together in a greenhouse gas emissions inventory report to be distributed to each member city. I will also speak of the work accomplished by a SBCCOG volunteer. Finally, I will cover what is in development as far as next steps in the process and the plans for a climate action plan update. Next slide, please. Thank you. First to be discussed is the energy related requests and emissions analysis. So to shed a little light on this, the energy and transportation sectors of the past greenhouse gas inventories are the largest categories of CO2 emissions. If you can see, the yellow, the green, and the blue take up, practically 85% or more of each of all the emissions in the inventory. So in order to make the process of data requisition as easy as possible for member cities, I created a resource guide, which is a step-by-step guide for cities to use when filling out the data request to their energy providers. As of right now, 7 cities have requested, obtained, and shared with us energy activity for the analysis in ICLEI's ClearPath tool. If you haven't heard of ICLEI, it's an international non-governmental organization that promotes sustainable development and technical consulting to local governments, and their tool is key to converting activity data into emissions. Next slide, please. Next, I would like to discuss the gathering of transportation-related data. Since the transportation sector is among the largest categories of emissions, gathering this data was of great importance. Transportation data was gathered from both the Southern California Association of Governments and Google Environmental Insights Explorer. SCAG data was used to evaluate community transit emissions from cars traveling, transit emissions, and Google EIE was used for their community vehicles miles traveled to analyze emissions for cars traveling throughout the city. In order to be certain that this particular methodology was the right course for us to take, rigorous research was done and analysis of 3 to 4 different methodologies was completed. We ultimately chose to incorporate Google EIE data because it was sourced from Google Maps, was recommended by ICLEI, and is being used in greenhouse gas inventories by cities considered climate leaders. Next slide, please. In addition to community emissions, emissions from municipal activities were also analyzed. The municipal inventory is a subset of the community inventory and is separated to highlight areas of emissions that the city has more direct control over. This can be such as government buildings, city parks, and it also helps the city identify where reduction strategies can be implemented in order to set an example for the community. To accomplish this emissions analysis, I gathered energy activity from the Energy Star portfolio manager. I also created a municipal fleet request template that was personalized and distributed to each of the city members. 6 member cities returned the fleet data, and both fleet and energy data were analyzed in ICLEI's ClearPath tool. Next slide, please. Finally, the analyzed data from both community and municipal activity are being compiled into a greenhouse gas emissions inventory report. To provide a little background, the adopted caps included emissions reductions targets of 15% by 2020. This greenhouse gas inventory covers the years 2020 as well as 2019 because of the pandemic. It could be used to compare cities' progress for their reduction targets. As of now, I have created a template to report each city's greenhouse gas emissions, which includes graphs illustrating progress, tables of activities of emissions over time, and a section explaining how the inventory all came together. I would like to highlight that SBCCOG has had a wonderful volunteer, Maria Fonseca, who is here today. She had expressed interest in our climate work and has just been a complete asset to our team. Maria has provided updates to SBCCOG's website and has helped in the creation of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory report template. Our work together was featured in the spring 2023 South Bay Watch newsletter, building anticipation and for the release of the 2019-2020 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Thank you, Maria. Next slide. The work is not yet over. I must compile these emissions data into the report template for the 4 cities that have provided us with all the required data and present the findings to them. The 4 cities include El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, Rancho Palos Verdes, and Torrance. These cities can think about how greenhouse gas emissions inventory can be used as a framework for a climate action plan update. In the meantime, I will ensure the next Civic Spark Fellow has all the necessary materials to be successful. And they can create updated emissions forecasts, compile a list of strategies to present to the cities, and cities can make informed decisions about how to further reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. To date, this is the list of the cities that still require a small piece of data for their inventory to be considered complete. We are eager to work with these cities and look forward to finding out together just how much greenhouse gas emissions have been reduced. I just wanted to thank everybody here at SBCCOG. You have welcomed me, given me just the confidence I needed to pick up where I had no idea where I was coming from and just go with it. And I thank you to all the city partners who I have worked with. And if you have any questions or would like to go ahead and speak them now or go ahead and contact me at my email address there.
Thank you, Lauren, for that presentation. Any questions, or anybody for Lauren?
I think we should give you one sneak preview. And when you get what we're finding out, you don't have any results here yet because we're still compiling them. But when one of the most interesting results, which is, I guess, the good news and the bad news, is that the energy, you explain, the energy
So
consumption.
what we're finding, what's really interesting is that you're going to see that the overall greenhouse gas emissions for those 2 categories have significantly decreased, even in 2019, which was before the pandemic. But in energy sector specifically, because of all of the federal and state laws, the energy mix is cleaner. So the use itself hasn't gone down. The use is about the same. In some cities, it's actually more, but the greenhouse gases emitted from that is actually less. So that's when we start to use all these renewables, when people are using more solar, we're not buying coal from other states. That is helping our greenhouse gases go down. So that was really interesting. We're seeing some similar with the fleets because, the fleet's converting to electricity, right? So while the miles themselves is not going down, right? There's a lot of traffic out there. We've got to do something about that. But at least it's cleaner traffic. So that's the idea.
Unfortunately, your habits are the same. It's just
that we're getting better. Yeah, we're getting better at doing it.
Source of energy.
So we're not necessarily using less energy, but we're being more efficient in how we generate it.
Correct.
Are you seeing any similar effect from LED lights and that type of things, more efficient use of energy?
I would say it's all of those things, right? It's the Title 24 codes that have come in over the years. It's the requirements from utilities to actually do more renewables. It's people in their own homes doing more renewables. So I think it's really a combination of all of those things working together.
To what extent, when the data is complete, will you be able to identify electric power in the form of the community choice aggregator in our region Clean Power Alliance is contributing to that. Obviously, Edison is generating some clean power too.
Right.
To what extent will the final results allow a breakout of power source contributing to that reduction as you described in?
Yeah, we don't have, the utilities are very careful at what they release. So we only have total numbers and they actually are the ones that do the emissions that they report out. So we won't know exactly what mix is being purchased clean versus not, like your community choice aggregation work, right, through the CCA. But when like the cities are purchasing cleaner power, that is going to have an overall effect on the emissions that then Edison is reporting out for the city.
I guess what I'm
So-
looking for is the ability to point to this as a
Yeah.
beneficial contributor to the reduction.
Yeah, it's going to contribute, it's going to be a beneficial contributor because it's going, for your city, you're going to have purchased cleaner power. And the data is by city. It's not just an aggregate of the South Bay.
Would the Clean Power Alliance be able to take our report and do something with it?
They have a different, they could work together, but I don't know that they're gonna be able to actually pull out exactly their piece.
Thank you.
Because, and then what's also interesting is that the utilities are very careful even when they're separating like commercial energy versus residential. If you have a big producer, some of these cities have big producers, and so they're really careful about privacy. Yeah.
So the report does not separate out residential from commercial from municipal.
It does that.
It will.
So then if I know that 92% of the houses in Rolling Hills Estates are part of the Clean Power Alliance, and you already know how many residences there are and how many are contributing to clean air, can you not extrapolate numbers?
It'll show in the residential information, but you're not gonna know like household by household.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But I mean, as
Okay.
far as a contributor to clean air
Mhm.
or clean energy use, you might be able to extrapolate.
What you'll be able to do is that this will verify that you've reached what you want. So it's more of a verification because this is sort of looking at the big picture at the city and
Right.
you're the bottoms up, right? So then if you've got 90% or whatever that number is of buying clean power, and then if we showed that you had terrible, then you would know something's wrong. But because their numbers are right on, we're matching, we're sort of verifying each other. Does that make sense?
I mean, you can get even more granular because Clean Power Alliance tells us how many are at 100% clean energy and, 50 and
Yeah.
less.
So
So
we could roll that into the report specifically for those cities that belong to the Clean Power Alliance. I think there's one
suggest
more
that we do
question.
that.
Could you go back to the presentation for a second? I had a question on the second to last. I think it was
The last slide.
yeah, it showed that cities what they're lacking.
While she's doing that, I just want to wish Lauren the best and thank Maria. We have had an incredible volunteer program, and if you know of other people that can help us, please let us know because each volunteer is incredibly valuable.
Mhm. There you go.
Okay.
We'll make it bigger for you. Hold on.
Please.
I promise.
What is it? Energy to do with the data? Thank you.
And we have another Civic Spark Fellow coming on the next cycle, and so they'll be picking up where Lauren left off and making sure that we get all the cities. We don't want any city left behind.
Right, these slides will be on our website under this board meeting, right? Natalie? So they're going to be on the website.
Any other questions? We'll make sure that we incorporate.
My question actually, these two gentlemen, because we're part of Clean Power Alliance, myself and Cedric, and Hawthorne is 100% green, right? So I'm wondering, if any data from that could help us improve our, seriously.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll do exactly what you're suggesting. We're gonna take the Clean Power Alliance and make it like maybe a chapter or something of their emissions inventory so that they have that extra level of detail. Yeah. And we can also come and present to your city, or to your commissions or your committees or the council.
It would help a great deal. In our city, for example, we adopted a general plan a few years ago, and as part of the EIR process for that general plan, we had to have mitigation measures to ensure that we're gonna achieve the reductions in greenhouse gas emissions that we anticipate or that we plan for. And we've joined the Clean Power Alliance, but we don't actually go into operation until March 2024. We're gonna want to be able to quantify the reductions in our community's greenhouse gas emissions so that we can understand whether or not we're meeting the benchmarks in our EIR that supports our general plan. So that type of data is going to be useful to the cities.
Yes, and that actually, one other thing, I was just gonna say one other thing. What we found is that a lot of cities aren't competitive unless they have some component of this in their applications. Even transportation, they want to see some kind of sustainability activity, and this gives the city that ability. Look at what we've done, look at what we've shown, look at the progress we've made. And so that helps make them more competitive. Sorry.
No problem. I guess based upon all of our cities, we're looking at how can we show where we started from? And based upon all the renewables that we're implementing and putting in place, over time, are we reducing our greenhouse gas emission in our communities? And then we need to know specifically based upon our cities. I know regionally, you may want to say the entire South Bay area may be reduced from what it was then to now. But each one of our cities will want to know specifically what have we done to address our own communities, since we are part, some of us are part of Clean Power Alliance, some are not, but they've done other areas of improvement through LED lighting, through other, areas within their community. So that's part of the report I hope we can actually put in place to address.
Right, and it'll be city specific.
Okay.
Right. Okay, we have our next fellow.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, who's also been doing a ton of work, and she's working on our energy efficiency. And one of her big projects that she's got, I'm not going to tell them too much about your work because I'm going to let you do it. But one of the big projects that she's been working on is the facility equipment inventory. And this is going to really give us the ability to advocate for the cities for certain things. Like, for example, lighting. We're finding that a lot of lighting needs to be replaced, but the CPUC is not really giving me incentives for lighting anymore. But if we can really advocate for that for the cities, then and say, hey, look, all of our cities need X number of lights replaced, then that gives us more power. And in even cities, when you're starting to actually do replacement, this will give you the ability to make good decisions. I know actually even Rolling Hills, we just started working with you guys where you just did a HVAC replacement. But this would have been maybe if we had been able to get this done sooner for you, then you would be able to say, hey, look at all these different options that we have. You might not decide to go with the most energy efficiency one, but at least you have the ability to make that decision. And so that's really what we want to try to do, is give cities the tools to make the decisions ahead of time so you're not having to do something at the very last minute. But with that, Talia, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, my name is Talia Perlis, and today I'll be presenting on my accomplishments over the past 11 months. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Next slide, please. So like I said, my name is Talia Perlis. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, right by UCLA. So I'm very familiar with the South Bay cities. I went to Scripps College, which is a small liberal arts school in Fairmont, California, and graduated in 2022 with a degree in environment, economics, and politics. And like I said, I've been working with the COG the past 11 months as the Energy Efficiency Fellow, and I'm very excited to be joining as project coordinator in a little over 2 weeks. Next slide, please. So Lauren gave a breakdown of implementing and development. So all my projects, which is very exciting, we're all implementing, which is great. But they're broken down into two main components, which is energy efficiency support, which is facilitating meetings with partners, SoCal Rent enrollment for cities and school districts, and our very own recognition program. And the second component is the equipment inventory, which includes energy benchmarking and AB 802 compliance, and the facility equipment inventory. Next slide, please. So the Southern California Regional Energy Network, also called SoCal Rent for short, is a service of LA County and offers an objective third-party resource for enrolled agencies and no-cost services that make it easier to take immediate action to save energy. So as of right now, we have 14 cities and 2 school districts enrolled, and 3 of these agencies were enrolled during my time as a fellow. And moving forward, we're going to continue enrolling agencies, hoping to have all eligible agencies enrolled at some point, focusing on the 1 remaining city and 8 school districts. And in the fall of 2023, we're going to focus our efforts on that school district enrollment by doing a campaign, an outreach campaign, presenting a package of programs coming from SoCal Ren, ourselves, and then our partners. And so some of those programs are Kids for Kids, water bottle filling stations, turf replacement, and other energy efficiency programs. Next slide, please. So the next program I helped to work on was the recognition program, which has been previously presented at a board of directors meeting. So I'm just providing a very quick overview and a status update. So the program recognizes cities for pursuing energy efficiency initiatives and completing sustainability related tasks. There are 3 levels of recognition, which is gold, silver, and bronze. And most importantly, cities have to be enrolled in the SoCal Ren to be able to participate in this program. Next slide, please. So the COG keeps track of the city's accomplishments and provides quarterly progress reports. And we just recently sent out the Q2 reports, and these reports outline all the activities that a city has completed that earned them a point, and then provides recommendations for future activities. And then after being provided these reports, the cities have 2 weeks to provide corrections and then let us know of any additional activities that they may have completed along with documentation. And as of today, we have 1 city that's reached the gold recognition level, which is Hawthorne, and 4 cities that have reached the silver recognition.
Hawthorne always comes in first. I just want you to know that.
We're very quick with it too.
Yeah.
You're like gold. And then we have 4 cities who are at the silver status, which is Carson, Manhattan Beach, Rolling Hills Estates, and Torrance. And
I was gonna say, I think Los Angeles City is eligible, but you're not a member of the Ren.
Right.
So we can't. Yeah. Would you? Okay.
but next year. So
every single city.
Yeah. So yeah, there's still a few months before the end of the first year of this program, and we're really excited to see what else the cities are going to accomplish. Next slide, please. And just some next steps include cities continuing to complete activities. South Bay COG and SoCal Ren will continue supporting the cities. We will be celebrating the city's accomplishments at an in-person event in December, and then we will launch the program's second year in January 2024. Next slide, please. So now this brings me to that second half of my fellowship with energy benchmarking and AB 802 compliance. And just for some background, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is ESPM for short, is a secure, free, interactive online tool that can be used to track energy use in properties. And we use ESPM to benchmark cities' SoCal Gas and SoCal Edison accounts. And we have data dating back to 2017 for electricity and 2018 for gas. And the COG submits energy data request forms. The formal name of that is scissor forms, but this just gives us streamlined access to cities' energy data. And we just have 3 remaining cities that need to release this data, and then we will have the scissor forms for all of our cities, which will make our energy benchmarking compliance even easier. And AB 802 compliance requires owners of commercial and multifamily buildings that are over 50,000 square feet to report their energy use every year to the California Energy Commission. And the South Bay COG has submitted the required energy data for 10 South Bay cities, bringing them all into compliance for 2023. And moving forward, we will continue to do so for cities as they're required to comply. Next slide, please. And this brings me to my last project, the one that I spent the most time on, both inside of work and outside. This project has really inspired me to just gain a better technical understanding of energy use. And just a few months ago, I became lead green associate certified just to have a better technical understanding as I'm making recommendations to cities. So the facility equipment inventory, which is FAE for short, we have a lot of acronyms here, but hopefully you guys aren't getting lost. It consists of cataloging all the equipment that uses energy. So lighting, HVAC units, water systems, plug loads, which is just anything that plugs into an outlet. And then we take all this information that's collected during a site visit and put it into a workbook that's then provided to the city to help them with their understanding of what's operating in their facility. And we also have the goal of making this something that can be updated because it is a time-intensive process of doing the inventory. So we want it to be something that can be updated to take the burden off the city. So that doesn't really have to be done again or very infrequently. And so we also will be using the information that we're collecting to make recommendations and guide cities in implementing efficient strategies that's going to reduce the utility bills and enhance the comfort in facilities. And we have the goal of just inventorying as many city facilities as possible before program funding ends. But we're prioritizing city halls because we're not only going to be providing city-specific recommendations, but we're also hoping to do regional analysis to get a better understanding of the energy efficiency needs of the South Bay as a whole, and then take that information and analysis and bring it to higher agencies to find funding resources. And so over the last 11 months, we've completed inventories for 25 city facilities across 10 South Bay cities. We've identified nearly 275,000 potential kilowatt hour savings coming from lighting and HVAC upgrades. And we've also been able to use this information to help cities capitalize on upgrade offerings. So recently the SoCal Red had an offering in which they're going to cover 80 to 100% of costs for upgrading a gas fueled inefficient water heater to an all electric, very efficient heat pump water heater. And because we had already collected information on the water systems in the participating cities' facilities, we were able to immediately confirm eligibility without having to have the cities do much, if any, work at all. And to make these recommendations, we used Utility Genius, which is a website in collaboration with Energy Star, and that allowed us to make lighting estimates for the cost of upgrading and then the savings coming from those upgrades. And we were also able to use ETRM, which is California's Electronic Technical Reference Manual, to identify predetermined estimates for HVAC upgrades. Next slide, please. And then on the screen, you'll see a list of all the cities that have participated. And the number of facilities depends on a city's capacity, as well as their prioritization of particular buildings. And then as you'll see, all 10 cities that have participated have had at least their city halls inventoried. And although program funding ends in December 2023, we're still setting up site visits. So if you don't see your city's name, or you do see your city's name but would like more buildings, we hope that you'll reach out, and my email will be linked at the end of the slides. Next slide, please. So this is a quick-ish video from a site visit we did back in May at Torrance's City Hall.
Our city is joining a regional effort to become more environmentally conscious when it comes to purchasing equipment that uses energy.
It's really part of our future plan is finding ways to become more efficient and also to reduce our energy consumption as a whole. We're going to be looking at a variety of light fixtures and anything that consumes energy and tagging that information so that we can understand where our kilowatt usage is actually going and how we can potentially improve in the future.
We created climate action plans back in 2017. Some of our cities maybe don't have the time or capacity with staff to go around their facilities and get this like detailed workbook of all the lights and energy using equipment. So we hope to relieve that burden a little bit by us taking those pictures and making these site visits and making all the recommendations they need to make well-informed decisions on purchasing energy using equipment.
The big goal is to help all cities in the South Bay identify opportunities to go green. The South Bay Cities Council of Governments, also known as SBCCOG, is conducting the inventories at South Bay municipal facilities in partnership with the Southern California Regional Energy Network, or SoCal Red. The South Bay COG will use the information to identify potential funding sources to help Torrance and its neighboring cities convert to more sustainable equipment. It will also use the information to update recommended energy saving strategies within the city's climate action plan developed in 2017. Those strategies will help Torrance do its part to move the state toward the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. As we inch towards the weekend, here are a few key events taking place.
Get to hear the event.
Very good.
So then on the screen, you're seeing an example of one of the deliverables in the final report. And this figure just gives an overview of all the recommendations that were made within the report and provides the estimate for potential kilowatt hour savings for specific actions and upfront costs. And then of course, the report gives more detail than just that. Next slide, please. And then this is another deliverable in the report. And it's a timeline or a roadmap for the replacement of HVAC units. And this timeline is created using the manufacture dates of the existing HVAC equipment and then the ASHRAE equipment life expectancy chart. And ASHRAE is the industry organization that sets the standards and guidelines for basically all HVAC equipment. And so this timeline is looking 5, 10, and 15 years down the line to help cities prepare for what's coming down the pipeline and plan procurement strategies ahead of time. Next slide, please. And so some next steps, and this is another picture from our Torrance site visit, climbing up a nice tall ladder. Some next steps include continuing to conduct site visits and training the next Civic Spark Fellow to perform these site visits with me. We're going to continue working on the workbooks and developing recommendations. We're going to present our findings to the cities and also report to higher agencies to find funding resources. And we're going to work with city procurement staff to identify opportunities to streamline the replacement process and also look for other ways that South Bay cities can collaborate with each other for the potential of joint procurement. Next slide, please. Thank you again for allowing me to speak about my accomplishments with you all. I would like to thank the COG staff, especially Kim, for all the guidance I've received and opportunities for professional development. I'm really looking forward to continue to work with the COG.
Real nice report. Any questions anybody want to ask Talia?
Not a question, but it's just a quick comment. Thank you for the good work. One thing I just would suggest for all of us in terms of communicating with our constituents is, for example, that report from the Torrance TV news report talked all about lowering greenhouse gas emissions. What it didn't talk about is by doing that, we're lowering the cost of operating the city. And there are going to be constituents we have that are receptive to lowering greenhouse gas emissions for the virtue of doing that. But regardless of where we come from, I'm sure we hear from our constituents that they want us to lower the cost of operating the city. So whether it's converting our fleets to EVs or changing out our bulbs to LEDs or replacing gas water heaters with heat pumps, the bottom line savings to our day-to-day costs of operating our cities is something that needs to be communicated.
Good point.
Good point. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Talia.
I can mention that yesterday I met with some of the park and recreation directors. And I said, you know, if you want buildings included that are not, the more buildings we get on this facility inventory, the better we can figure out what's really needed and ask for money for those projects. So please, you know, ask your city if you haven't seen it up there, if there's a building that should be identified.
And I'd like to do every single building. Like, if we get every single building, I'd be super happy. So we're ready to do it. Only because they're ready to do it. Yeah. Thank you, Talia.
Thank you. Next up, Becky, the SBCCOG project.
Environmental Services Program. Well, you just heard most of the projects, but Kim, do you want to talk about anything specific?
I don't think anything else to give you except for one item is when the team is going out there, we are leveraging our other partners. As you know, we're partners with West Basin Municipal Water Districts, for example, also for Torrance Water. And we're looking at, they're taking snapshots of potential opportunities for grass replacement or turf replacement. So we'll also be working with the cities to see if they would like to do that. That also obviously reduces costs. And you know, I don't think I have more to say because I know you're running.
Well, you do have more to say. One of the things that I will
more to say.
We are going to be asking you, and hopefully you can accommodate this, to save the next 2 months before the board meeting for special events. And a big special event is the September board meeting. We're going to meet at 4:00 here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the South Bay Environmental Services Center. We started this 20 years ago. For those of you that haven't been around, it was a grant from Redondo Beach that they got from the state. And the city manager contacted us and said, would you like to take this grant over for the whole South Bay? And that started us. If you think about 2003, we weren't all thinking about energy all the time. And so we got in on the ground floor and we have been able to build 20 years, things like you just heard, building on and building and building on things in your cities that we could help, and also building wonderful volunteers. So that's going to be September 28th. It's September 28th. And we're going to start at 4:00. 4:30, excuse me. That starts at 4:30. And we're inviting all of our partners. We're talking to our legislators. It's a big deal. This is our
utilities,
yeah,
volunteers,
all of our partners. So please save the time and plan to come a little early. Thank you.
Transportation report?
Is Mike Bulkey here? Yes, Mike is here. And Mike, do you want to give your report?
Yes, good evening, board members. It was a very light board meeting today. The agenda only had a couple of issues on it. But I think the more important issue that you would like to hear about today was the returning of the staff to the board regarding the VMT mitigation program. In anticipation of coming back to the board in September with technical information, staff gave a relatively brief status update on the unfunded and mandated state VMT mitigation program. The Metro VMT mitigation program is supposed to reduce greenhouse gases and vehicle miles traveled on highway projects through the transit fan pool, active transportation, land use, and pricing mitigation strategies, plus equity criteria related to fair and just access to opportunities. The VMT program may result in modifications and related cost increases to the subject projects in consultation with the local jurisdictions and Caltrans. The board will be particularly mindful of the costs of VMT mitigation costs because of new funding issues. There are 4 South Bay Highway projects in the South Bay subject to the VMT mitigation. The I-405, 110, 105, and SR 91 ramp and interchange improvements, the 405, 110 HOV connector ramps and interchange improvements, the 110 express lanes extension south to the 405, 110 interchange, and the 405 South Bay curve improvements. Like I said just a few seconds ago, in September, they'll bring us more technical information so the board will have a better idea of how to come to grips with this issue. Meanwhile, on a global level, the Metro board members expressed a lot of concern today over amending the life of project budget on the West Side Purple Line, Section 2, by 134 million. Now, the board's concerns can probably be best characterized as overruns on all projects will create a tipping point for funding and scheduling future projects. This ripple effect across the board has the potential to jeopardize Metro's ambitious capital projects program in planning and construction and operations skyrocketing costs when you factor in the added costs of policing and operating new lines as they come up. That's pretty much sums up what was going on at the board today. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
I'd like to add something. Yesterday, the executive directors of the COGs meet with Stephanie Wiggins, the executive director of Metro, on a regular basis, and she mentioned this VMT issue. And I cannot give you the specifics. I don't know them, but what she said was things like the South Bay curve, where we fought for years to put in little lane additions on the sides and everything. The way I think it's she said the Office of Planning and Research and Caltrans are interpreting the law, SB 743, which changed from level of service to VMT. The way they're interpreting it, it would double the cost of some of the Metro projects, that there would be more mitigations required. And the idea is to stop highway projects and only have transit projects. What they're doing is, these are little, in our area, there are little improvements that have been needed for many, many years. And we don't know what the impact will be on our projects. And I think our projects are also in the out years. But there's a lot of if they have to double the cost of the immediate projects, we will never get our projects. So we're going to be following up with that. It's a very, very big issue that sounds like a staff interpretation of a law that I think we might even need to go to our legislators and say, did you know that the way the law is being interpreted, this is what's happening in your area. So we're going to try and flesh this out. So I just want to let you know that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add and piggyback on that the Metro staff and the Metro board are really pressing Caltrans on that issue. And so that they can try to mitigate it just being a bureaucratic, autocratic type of interpretation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. David, can you speak on the Transportation Committee?
Yeah, we didn't have too many items. I think the main thing was a presentation by Metro on the regional connector project that just opened in downtown. I think that was,
That's all.
it was a pretty light meeting.
Yeah. And I'm terribly sorry for this air conditioning. I don't know if it's bothering any of you. It's making me crazy.
Yeah.
Why?
I can hear now.
Now you can hear real good.
Yeah.
Local Travel Network.
David, do you want to give an update?
Sure. So we are continuing to work with El Segundo on a pilot project. We hope to have signs rolling out in the next month or so, targeting Labor Day-ish, ribbon cutting sort of celebration event. Redondo Beach submitted their application to implement the project, and we hope that the Metro Board will be approving that in September as part of our Measure M program update. We also submitted scopes of work for route refinement for the remaining cities. That work will take place over the next 3 or 4 years. We're also anxiously awaiting word from Caltrans, hopefully by the end of August, if we were successful in a sustainability planning grant that would help us do some of the planning work for the gaps in the network that require a little bit more intricate analysis. And a part of that grant will also include funding for like a ride and drive event to get folks into these vehicles, experiencing what it would be like to use a local use vehicle to make some of their trips. And I think that's about it, LTN really.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention is that I know we came to Manhattan Beach City Council and there was a concern about signs. And I just want to say a proliferation of signs, maybe among other concerns, but the reason we're doing the El Segundo pilot is we want to try to put a minimum number of things in. You can always add signs, you can always add street markings. So we're going to see how much we do with the minimum amount. We do know your cities, we do know they know how to get around, but maybe we can put up just a discrete number of things and promote the use of these vehicles. So that's really the purpose of the pilot, is to try to see what we can do.
So having just had the presentation at Manhattan Beach City Council, I'd like to report if I could. First of all, I think David did a good job with what he had to work with, but he met with a very skeptical council. And I wanted you to understand why, because it wasn't just the signs. The issue is, it's not clear whether this is about a regional network for slow moving vehicles, or if this is to establish routes within our own communities. And to the latter point, the council members who were most opposed to this stated that most members of our own community know which routes they're going to take and know which ones are safe already. So I think we need to be clear what this is. I was able to save it by arguing that this is part of an interconnected regional network. And I think that's what you may need to rely on, because otherwise you may reach other councils that are also going to be a bit skeptical.
Well, I think and I should have said that too. That's part of the El Segundo pilot. What happened was we had identified routes in El Segundo. And then we went and drove El Segundo. We said, why did we identify routes? Everybody in El Segundo knows where everything is. And there are visitors. So you want something for visitors. But if we could try this with the fewer signs and put up, what we need is we need signs, tell people, for example, in El Segundo, I'll use it, to get across PCH. Where's it safe to get across to another 35-mile-an-hour street, so that you can get to all sides of the city. So we're going to try to put up discrete numbers of signs because it is a network. What we learned by driving El Segundo is people know their cities. So let's figure out how we're connecting. And the gap, this Caltrans grant, which we're waiting for so much, is that there are little things like getting out of El Segundo, which we cannot do unless we can do a little bit more planning. So it's definitely a network. And I think we ourselves started off as a network, went a little bit too deep, and now we're trying to come back ourselves.
Yeah, we had a community workshop on traffic calming measures last week. And so we were thinking of, so how does the local travel network mesh with that? Which it definitely should, because one can help us advance the other. We have some streets that are oddly over wide, like, 100-foot wide residential street. A couple of those, Eshelman being the winner, but and so those are good opportunities. And they also, the placement of them links nicely. So really, I think this is something we need to think about too, is where does the local travel network provide us an opportunity to do traffic calming?
Can you bring us in?
We're hoping we could lower the speed on that street to like 65 or.
Maybe you can bring us in when you have some things like that, and we can try to figure out how to fit ourselves into the presentation.
Last comment to Barry's point, and that would be, some of us in this room helped create a monster with regard to traffic calming and the road diet. Because if anything, that was, as someone who helped lead that effort, that was thrown in our face. Do we really want to be slowing our roadways when this was such a bad experiment on Vista Del Mar? So I just would say it can cut both ways. So I think we need to be a little attuned to communities where you make it.
The local travel network isn't going to do that, but maybe there's ways it can facilitate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Skag Reap. Okay, Jonathan Pacheco Bell is here. Jonathan, do you want to give the REAP report?
Yes, thank you, Jackie. Good evening, board members. This is a report on REAP and our housing and land use activities, starting with Regional Early Action Planning REAP 1.0. This is our current program. First project to discuss is the ADU Acceleration Project. This is an empirical study of ADUs in 8 South Bay cities, and we are close to the end of the project. We have reviewed all of the deliverables, and we've made extensive comments for our consultant, and they are working on those revisions. They want to do a great job. They want to get this nice and polished. So at their request, we've done a no-cost time extension to August 31st to give them a little bit more time to refine the project deliverables so we can get that for publication and a presentation to our board here, either in September or sometime in the fall. So stay tuned on that. Also with REAP 1, we have the commercial redevelopment into housing study. And that is a study of underperforming commercial properties in the South Bay and how can we turn those into housing? Is it possible? It's a very similar update. We reviewed the completed first draft of the report from our consultant team. We've made extensive comments. We've asked them to do some revisions and some edits. So they are working on that. They're also adding a little bit more developer outreach so we can have that as part of this report. And they're doing some additional analysis on locations after receiving our comments. At their request, we're also doing a no-cost time extension to September 30th to give them a little bit more time to get that publication ready so that we can finish the project and then make the presentation to our board here in the fall. The Housing Education Forum, actually, I'd like to share my screen for one moment. I want to give you a visual of all we've been doing with the Housing Education Forum. Let's see. There we go. So this is an overview of all of the sessions that we've had in black, starting with housing markets, all the way down to transportation and land use. We've had 8 sessions from January to June. We are averaging around 20 to 30 attendees each time, which is great. We had a high point of 40 attendees when HCD spoke about state housing policy, and it's been very well received. We get some very constructive comments in our post-event surveys. Thank you all for attending as board members and encouraging your planning commissioners and planning directors and staff to attend. We've had a lot of people really enjoy the housing forum, and with that, with an increased demand, we've actually decided to add 2 sessions because we have time with REAP 1. So we're going to add a session that will explain, it'll give an overview of the ADU Acceleration Project, and we're going to add a session that gives an overview of the commercial redevelopment into housing project so we can share the findings as part of the Housing Education Forum. And we'll conclude with the wrap-up session. So the 2 added sessions on ADU and commercial redevelopment are slated for September or October, and then that final wrap-up session will be in November. And I just want to give you an idea who's attending. We have mayors and council members, city managers, various commissioners, planning directors, planning managers, and staff from, you know, city and county offices for planning, housing, economic development, city manager. We have developers, community partners, consultants. We have the SCAG team and the South Bay City's COG team. So it's been a really well-received and enjoyable session or forum with several sessions that people are enjoying. And we're going to add to it a little bit and keep it going since we have the ability to do that through REAP. Next item is REAP 2. So that is the focus on implementation. So REAP 1 is focused on planning. REAP 2 is focused on implementation. I have good news that I can finally share. So there's a couple different options of REAP 2 money that we've applied to. The Metro CTC County Transportation Commission option, the partnership with Metro, we were selected for a grant-funded project. Very happy to report that finally we can say it publicly. It is a partnership with RCOG Metro. It's on micro-mobility and neighborhood mobility hubs. So it'll have a connection to transportation and housing and a lot of the work that we do. It is the overall budget is about $404,000 with $385,000 coming to our COG. And we're just starting the collaborative process now with all the various partners. So stay tuned for more because we have another option for REAP 2 that we're waiting to hear back on. That's the sub-regional partnership option. That's specifically for COGs. So we applied for the South Bay Regional Housing Trust formation steps and the commercial redevelopment into housing phase 2. So a continuation of what we're doing, which is much more of a deeper dive. And we're waiting to hear back from SCAG. We expect maybe late July, maybe early August from what we've heard. And we feel very confident about those applications. These projects would start round about January 2024 after all the MOUs are done. And then finally, one of the things that we've started to add both in our steering and in our planning director meetings, and we're going to do that here, is just a little segment wrapping up or explaining and kind of doing an overview of the help that I've given as a regional planner to the planning directors. So for the last month, just to give you an example, I have helped City of Lomita with a couple of things, help them do research on EV charging stations as a primary land use, help them with the graffiti and mural ordinances that are going to council or going to planning commission, and the inclusionary housing research that they're doing for their work. El Segundo, I helped them along with Lauren, who presented today, and Sean and the environmental team helped El Segundo on climate action plans and just kind of getting some background information for the staff at the city of El Segundo. And Hawthorne, I helped along with Jackie prepare a support letter for a REAP 2 project that the city is applying for. So it shows, you know, all the help that the regional planner can do for our cities. That is the report on REAP and housing and land use. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I don't know if this is the time. I was going to talk about this at some point, so I will do it right now. The city, as you know, the city managers, I think I've told you, city managers have been looking at the housing trust. We got legislation to form the housing trust, but that's it, it's a shell. So the city, there's hardly any specificity in that. We did not get any money with it. A lot of other areas got money with the housing trust. We did not get money from our legislators. Nobody put an earmark. We tried to get some this year, obviously with the deficit, no way. So, so the city managers decided that maybe they would work on the JPA agreement. And so they would be able to, we could hit the ground running. JPA agreement includes a lot of things like who should be on the board and a lot of those, you know, what is there a fee to administer it? Who's going to pay that fee? And so they pretty much have completed the document, but they didn't want to present it because we're really not ready to do that yet because you still don't know the nuts and bolts of the Regional Housing Trust. So the REAP grant that you heard about is going to, this is what Gateway did. They got a consultant and the consultant came in, talked to your cities about potential projects, talked to developers about what they're looking for, talked to financial institutions so that we could understand the potential for projects for the Housing Trust and how much money might be needed and how much we should be asking for. So that's the first thing. It also was going to make recommendations on who should be on the board of directors and all those kinds of things. So, but the city managers would want to move a little faster than that.
And so we still are gonna do that. I think you still need that information. But what they would like to do, and what was, and it's up to you to decide whether you want to spend the time to do this. And I'm gonna see if I can figure it out. They think that it would be helpful, and I think it probably would be, to invite colleagues, your colleagues, city council members from San Gabriel Valley and from Gateway to talk about their considerations when they formed their housing trust, why they did it the way they did it, what the pitfalls were, what they hadn't thought about. And so if you are okay with that, I would be doing that in probably October, sometime October time period. We would have a special meeting, maybe before the board meeting, but we'd have a special meeting to talk with your colleagues about those things. If that's something you think would be helpful, the August city managers meeting they're going to be talking about questions that we want to ask, because if I invited you to a meeting, you wouldn't know what I wanted you to talk about. So I want to get from you and from city managers, what questions should I say to them? Would you be ready to answer these questions? So I'd love to get your feedback on your initial reaction and whether you think that's a good idea or not a good idea. We will hit the ground running with a consultant in January that's going to put more flesh on the bones. We also might be able to go to our legislators again and say, what about an earmark for our housing trust? But right now we don't even know how many cities want to join. That's our problem right at this moment. So I'd love to get your feedback on a special forum with San Gabriel Valley and Gateway. Any thoughts?
So the goal is to, as we try to get our regional housing trust off the ground, to gather whatever lessons learned we can from other folks who have done it and their experience. It makes perfect sense to me. I would think if it was San Gabriel Valley, we would want to meet at SCAG offices in downtown or something in the middle, right? Or are we talking about doing it via Zoom? And if that's the case, I would just say anytime closer to the middle of winter is better to leave the beach, because I mean,
Don't rub it in, don't rub it in.
like they have a conference in Pomona at the beginning of August, and I was just thinking to myself, that's not the ideal time to be in Pomona.
I'm going to that conference.
Yeah, so anyway.
But Jackie, my question would be, of all of our cities, how many have you got interested in wanting to be even a part of it? That seemed to be the bigger number to find out how many even want to be a part of it.
Okay, well, the city managers discussed this at their meeting, and they can't answer that question because, and what I was trying to explain, I think, is that until you get this consultant to come in, talk to developers, talk to cities, you're really not going to know. I mean, I don't know that you have the information to make that decision. So the thought was maybe we form the JPA and there's no administrative fee. But at some point that probably would need to be added, and then you'd be in the JPA. Or would you agree to join the JPA with holes in it? And that's the question.
I don't know if my attorney would allow that to happen.
So this is and I think you need to maybe go back to your city managers and get them to talk to you about their discussions. Because the JPA agreement, we went over, an administrative fee, and the administrative fee, I think for the first year, if you look at Gateway and San Gabriel, it was about $250,000, which the COG can't absorb. So that's another special assessment. How do you do that? And so these are the questions that are still up in the air. And so we don't quite know. The next steps they thought would be maybe this form that we could try.
I guess I would pick up on the chairman's question in terms of trying to envision what this is and where it would make sense for which of our communities, because I'm not sure if it would make sense for all of our communities. So there's maybe not enough definition about what this simply could be, at least for me, such to ask colleagues in another region as to how they got there. I think maybe there could be some work done on your side to just identify what this is in other communities and which communities here we could maybe elicit might be interested, because this is what I heard from our city manager who participated in that conversation. Is it circular?
Yeah, it is circular. And and in my own defense, we've had, and the city managers have had San Gabriel Valley come out and talk. I mean, they've had all the staff people come out and talk. So they don't know if their cities are ready to sign on or not. And to me, I keep saying, I know it's unfortunate, but we have this money coming in from that Gateway used to form theirs. It is going through, you know, your development, your cities, and really doing the groundwork. We haven't done that groundwork. And so I can't advise you. I have no idea how it would work out in your.
Do our city managers feel that there's value for our cities for this trust fund?
Okay, I think the city managers, several of them have a feeling, which is maybe right or wrong, that if you say you're in a trust, and here's Mike has been there, we're talking about the trust. So if you feel that if you have a trust, then HCD will look more kindly on you, that you will be able to say that you're doing these things, you're participating in something. Also, there's going to be a bond measure, and that money might come. If we had a trust, there might be a reason to have a trust, just because money that flows might flow to those trusts, anybody that has one. So it's a possibility that it makes a lot of sense. There's also the regional LA County trust that has been created, that John Marish sits on for all of you. And that will have to go for, they don't have any money either. And that would have to go for a ballot measure November 2024. And we and the West Side would split 7% of the proceeds, whatever that would be. But it would be, for all LA County, it would be a lot of money, I suppose. But we're in there for 7% of the proceeds with West Side cities. So there's funding, and we could maybe accept that as a COG, except that we're not a housing trust. And so there might be reasons to have a housing trust just in your back pocket. But the question is, how active can we get right at this moment? And Mike, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, yeah, I do. You know, the way we constructed this agreement is that it's really a no-lose proposition, because the agreement is crafted in a way that no city has to proceed with a housing. No city that is a member of the trust can be compelled to approve any housing project. Any housing project that is approved by the trust must proceed with the consent of the host city. So this is, in essence, a magnet for money that is going to be available and will be essentially, if you don't have a trust, you will not be able to accept it, money that would be made available. And in those cities that wish to proceed with projects, they will be able to use the money to leverage those projects. So, you know, there's a lot of protections built into this trust, and understanding that some of the cities that may be reluctant may not want to pay an administrative fee if they don't feel that they can get benefit out of this. We have prepared a version of this that does not require the payment of any fee and makes essentially the operation of the trust contingent upon the receipt of outside funds, whether it's from the county or whether it's from the state, that will be eligible to pay the administrative costs of the trust. So at a minimum, I think that if what Jackie's proposing is that we have this forum to answer questions, to present the information, to look further into this. You know, the managers were solidly behind having the forum, think it's a good idea, and then it'll create an opportunity for us to visit with some folks from the other trusts who have, as Jackie said, received a lot of money and are in a position to leverage some housing in their communities. So, you know, it really, as constructed, there's no downside that we can see. And so the manager's biggest reluctance was from some cities that felt that they weren't going to benefit and didn't want to have to pay. And so the option is to eliminate a mandatory fee.
Well, and my trepidation is that there's going to be expenses. And so at some point there has to be somebody's got to pay those expenses. If we don't get outside funding, if we don't get the money, we can't hire somebody who understands finances, which nobody on our staff is going to be able to be the administrator of this housing trust.
And in that regard, you know, the way one of the options we've created is to provide for an automatic sunset of the JPA if we don't get funding by a date certain. So in other words, the housing trust would be dormant, but it would be
in existence so that it would be eligible to receive funding if that funding is made available. And if that funding is made available, then the trust can start operating. If no funding is made available by a date certain, it would simply dissolve on its own, sunset, no harm, no foul. So we tried to set it up in a way that would satisfy everyone's concerns. And we understand that some of the cities represented here have concerns. And so we tried to construct it in a way that it wouldn't be an issue for those cities that have issues and concerns.
No comments? Everybody's like,
I mean, we're still back to this, the form. Should we work on this form?
Yes.
I say
Yeah.
yes. Okay, we'll work on the form
you know, like I said, no harm, no foul.
and talk to your city managers about questions that you might, that you have. Why would you want to do this?
I just feel that most of our cities and most of us that are here, our cities are concerned with paying out additional funding and looking at what rate of return are we getting back on this funding. Knowing that we have the arena housing and all the other elements that's being put on all of our cities, by this being in place, what is it going to do to assist us in meeting those demands that's been placed on each one of our cities? And hopefully, because if we're doing it into the actual housing trust, those funds could have been used to deal with what you needed to do in your city directly versus putting it into a housing trust. See, it's diverting funds that could have been used upfront versus putting it in another location. Then the back end of that would be, how is it going to be distributed based upon if you do get this large sum of money and how that's going to be given to each one of our.
Well, that's a board of directors. That it would have its own.
It's a layered approach. That's.
Yeah. And Mike, the one thing I wasn't aware of is that you were going to write in there that had to be outside funding. I thought where the funding was coming from would be silent, but so if we could, and what you're saying is that if you had to give an administrative fee to the trust, you could better use it on your own housing.
Yeah.
What the city managers are saying is there are things like maybe you don't need as much density because you'll be able to write down some of the cost of the housing. Is that what you're saying? That it might be a way to protect cities against having as much density and still having developers be able to afford more affordable housing. So those are the kinds of things I think we need to talk about, is where the trade-offs come.
And there was also some discussion about whether or not existing market rate housing that could be potentially converted to affordable housing.
Right.
Would be not only eligible for this sort of funding, but would also contribute towards RENA.
Yeah, there's cities that are saying you could actually buy housing in your city and then underwrite the cost. Okay, I'm sorry, that was just sort of a diversion from the REAP. Did anybody have any questions on REAP?
Yeah, and I'm trying to keep us within our time frame.
Okay,
South Bay Fiber.
South Bay Fiber, we're still, I think I'll have more to report next month, so I'm not gonna report anything this month.
Homeless services.
Okay, on homeless services, you want me to do this thing first? You have two flyers in front of you. And I'll start with Justin Massey actually brought to our attention the fact that winter shelter program is out. And if you read this, the first sentence is a real kicker. If you remember last year when the rains came, we don't have winter like snow and sleet, but we had a lot of rain and 2 people did die in the South Bay. And so we want to get ahead of the game. And we met at Hermosa Beach, for example, expressed an interest in possibly having a shelter, but having one shelter in the South Bay is not going to respond to the needs. So we were looking at maybe we could get a couple of cities or several cities to do shelters, and then not everybody would have to have the burden of being the shelter. The other thing that Ronson did, which I think was really great, is he contacted LASA, who said that we could set up the shelters that we set up exclusively for South Bay residents. They would allow us to do that. So, but we're looking for cities that would be willing to step up. We're talking about November 1st to March 31st, but it can be shorter. And you can see the program details. You don't have to staff it, but it has to be a certain size. We're looking for you to talk to your city and see if you would be willing to help out so that we can
address the issue without any city having to take the full burden, and we can keep these, our residents in the South Bay. Did I say everything, Ronson? Yeah, please contact Ronson if you.
Questions on that?
Yeah. So is it just facilities with restrooms or they need showers?
we
Showers would be great, but they can bring showers into.
Yeah, we can do portable, they can do mobile showers, and that's what they would do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a size issue too. I mean, if you have a smaller facility, then probably not, but if it's a larger city, then they can definitely bring showers into the facility.
So please let Ronson know, we'd really love to be able to get ahead of this.
Right.
No, then we have one more flyer that we want to talk to you about.
Yeah,
I'll just mention, this is, I'll steal your thunder, Ronson. If you remember,
This is gonna take over.
if you remember, we were going to go to Be Well, which is a place in Orange County. We had discussed going on a tour to see a facility that handles a lot of the issues that we've been talking about here, and I'll let Ronson elaborate. But unfortunately, it is a working facility, and they came back to us and they said as much as they would love to show it, they would only show it in groups of 6, which don't really, it's gonna be really hard to do this. So we came back with an alternative proposal, which is what this flyer is about. So Ronson, do you want to talk about that?
yeah, so we've been getting a lot of requests from city staff and city electeds to kind of check out different solutions in other areas, and Be Well was top of mind for a lot of our staff. They operate a campus in the city of Orange, and they're actually expanding into a 20-acre campus in Irvine. So it's really interesting. It's a private-public partnership. One of the things that's kind of interesting about it is that they're able to kind of navigate the political waters of doing something like this. But the facilities have mental health facilities, detox facilities, and then one of the things that's really interesting to a lot of our cities is their alternative crisis response. And it's been very successful in reducing the number of police and fire engagement to non law enforcement type calls. So they've been pretty successful, and Catherine is gonna give a presentation on that and also provide a video of the facilities that they're planning and that currently exists. Yeah, and another thing too is that they sit at a very interesting place where they're accepting funding from state and county. So there's funding, interesting funding developments in regards to how they're structured and how they operate. So yeah, so we want to invite city elected staff, police and fire leadership to this event. It's August 24th, 4 p.m. That's right before our next board meeting. And send your RSVPs to me no later than August 23rd.
And so take this back to your city. We will send out electronically, obviously, but we're talking about police. We're talking about, your community development staff, anybody, or your park and recreation, anybody that might find it interesting as to how this might happen. The reason for this virtual presentation is we want to have as many people see the facility as possible, but we want you to know that if after you see them, you still want to go to Orange County, we will arrange that. But we are hoping that the people that are satisfied with this presentation will lower the number of people that we need to take to Orange County. So it's not necessarily in lieu of, but hopefully it will satisfy a lot of you with the information on the virtual. So that's 4 o'clock next month. Okay.
One last thing,
I'm sorry, Jackie, because it's before our meeting, could we come here and watch the presentation?
Oh, yeah, I guess that's what we're talking about. Why did we put a Zoom link? That's really oh, no, it's a Zoom link for your staff. Yes, you should come here.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, your staff can watch on Zoom, but you should come here because it is before the board meeting. Yeah.
And then lastly, this is Lori Jacobs' actually last board meeting. She is retiring August 3rd. There is a get together August 2nd in Sirens in San Pedro. And we're gonna set her off, but just wanted to acknowledge that. Lori's been a great homeless advocate and has, been by my side as we put up these programs, and like client aid success she has a lot to do with that. So we're gonna miss her a lot, and it's gonna be hard to replace her.
Okay.
Bye, Lori.
Your screen is frozen.
It's frozen.
Get on the recording.
We did have a spy working group, and for the life of me right now, I can't remember.
There we go.
What the spy working group is Beach Cities Health District brings us together and we share ideas. And is there something specific that we needed to report, Ronson? We're looking.
No, everything was like in progress, like the
Yeah.
surveys.
Yeah, what happens is supervisors, staff comes to that meeting. We talk to Beach Cities Health District and we're really trying to think of health issues that we can all work on together. The last thing I just wanted to mention, the senior services is meeting in September. The last thing I wanted to mention is that there was a request by Manhattan Beach actually to look into dial-a-ride. Some cities, I think El Segundo does this, uses Lyft for dial-a-ride. And I heard from the Park and Recreation directors yesterday that some dial-a-ride trips are as much as $67 a trip. So we've been asking cities if they're interested in us looking at Lyft. And we did a poll, there was only a few cities that were even interested in it. So we've asked the beach cities to go back and actually talk to the beach cities and see about maybe if the health district or transit can do what they can. We'll help facilitate it, but it would be a great pilot for us to see how we can bring Lyft, maybe expanding the El Segundo program. And so your cities might be working on that. Because the Lyft program's a lot less. And so we'd love to help see what we can do. Monrovia, I think, has been using Lyft for several years. We had them in several years ago to explain their program. So I think that completes all of my budget.
And then agency reports.
I don't know, Katrina, I don't know if you wanted to give your any agency report since you're here. Katrina's Baldwin Hills.
I had actually sent an email asking for they wanted to do a presentation.
Oh, yes, next month you wanted to have a presentation. Okay, so yes, I wrote that down actually. Yes.
Perfect.
Oh. Want to let him talk?
Just real quick, Jeff McCoy with the League of Cities. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Obviously, the legislature's out on their summer recess until August the 14th. And then they return for just a single month and we'll recess for the year on September the 14th. So please chat with your legislators. My report includes a lot of legislation that we're working on and we could use your help on. I did want to highlight for you, because I know it's of big interest, under the public safety section of my report, AB 530. It's not something that Cal Cities has a policy on, but I think it might be of interest to you. It would help license e-bike riders under anyone. They would prohibit anyone under 12 from riding an e-bike of any kind, and over 12 they would need to they're actually setting up a new licensing system. It's going to be a very hard push to get it through the legislature, but I know it might be of interest to many of the cities in this room. So it was just gotten amended into this form, so it can't be acted on until January, but I would certainly recommend you all take a look at it.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Who opposes that bill?
It's going to cost a lot of money. That's going to be the hiccup.
To administer a licensing program.
Correct.
For
A 12-year-old?
12, anyone who has a driver's license wouldn't need to get this license according to the law or the proposed bill, but after 12, yes, you would need to actually have a licensing program that the state would then issue you with an ID. So that's the cost.
And if they raise the age at which you could ride an e-bike legally, that would lower the cost, I presume, right?
I think in a lot of the cities in this room would probably be opposed to that, since those younger folks tend to be the problematic ones.
No, that's
From
what
what I hear from you.
That's what I mean. If
Yeah.
you basically, I mean, if I understood correctly from the LA Times article about the girl who tragically passed when she was thrown from an e-bike in Pacific Palisades, at the end of the owner's manual of the Rad Power Bikes e-bike that she was riding, allegedly, it says in all caps, you shouldn't ride this if you're under 16 years old. So, for example, if AB 530 said you can't ride an e-bike if you're under 16, consistent with the manufacturer's recommendation, that'd be 4 years of kids for whom you wouldn't need to administer a licensing program, which would bring the cost of it down, is what I'm saying.
Potentially. My understanding is that there are certain laws, depending on the class of the bike, basically how fast they go, that do sort of get into that gray area. I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head, but there are a little bit of those laws already in place, but seems like we need a little more.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to the chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, David wanted me to share this with everyone who may have an interest in attending the grant funding workshop. It's gonna be August 12th at 11 a.m. at Lenox Community Library. Again, that is a grant funding workshop, August 12th from 11 to 12 p.m. at Lenox Community Library. Thank you.
Thank you.
For my office, that's what everyone wants to do.
That being said, Jackie, anybody have any upcoming events or announcements?
Just want to let everybody know, last call, it's gonna run out. We've got over probably 130 by now. Jeff is for the installation dinner for the League of California Cities LA Division, which is August 3rd. So
Yes, but who's being installed?
I am. Well, thank you, thank you. But no, it's gonna be a great event with the sheriff of LA County being the guest speaker. And my former boss, Steve Cooley, and constituent is going to be doing the swearing in for all of the officers. It's at the Hotel Maya, which is beautiful. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was a good, see, even from the peanut gallery, yeah, they all agree. Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, so it's gonna be a great event. So, and catch it quickly because we're
Before.
running out of space. Okay, and I'm gonna go run out and give Jeff some stuff for the dinner, and I'm gonna come right back.
Any other announcements? All righty, we're at the portion of the executive session, so individuals who are active voting members of the COG should stay.
We have a short rest.
Yes.
Gallery has to go.
Okay.